Our next expansion has been announced. Yep, Dragonflight was revealed, and it's actually a significant departure from the way World of Warcraft has been developed since Legion. That's the main exciting thing for me. They're taking a bold enough step into a World of Warcraft without borrowed power, and I think in a direction that looks very different to Shadowlands. And straight up, there's a lot that therefore sounds really good so far, but I would not expect this to release in 2022. Very much seems that Wrath of the Lich King Classic is going to bridge the gap with its 2022 release date, plus of course 9.2.5 and Season 4 of Shadowlands, meaning I am expecting Q1 2023 at the earliest, especially because this was a more sparse announcement than usual, quite notably not having a gameplay trailer. What I'm going to do in today's video is run down what I think the good things are, what a few of my worries are, and my overall opinion of this expansion thus far. Details are of course beginning to emerge via interviews, so come back to the channel tomorrow and I will give you a full breakdown into everything else that is there to know. But I'll tell you I know this much. My curiosity is piqued, and if World of Warcraft was to ever get itself properly back on track and recovering, then changes like these would be the first step in that. And you can take your first steps with Skillshare, today's sponsor, where we're going to learn some game development. And the first 1,000 of you to follow my link or use the promo code Bellular Gaming, well, you'll get a free month of Skillshare Premium. So here's the deal. Michael Moore wants to teach you programming and Unity. Now, look, I did the more hardcore C++ and GLSL stuff and, the custom engine programming in university. Let me tell you, not that useful. This is the way to actually learn if you just want to dive in and make some vidya. Plus, learning by doing is the best. It's the most fun, so what better way to learn C# than to actually make games in Unity? Plus, Michael's courses are on the modern versions of Unity, which is dead handy. I mean, once I've carved out a bit more free time, I'm going to loop back into the more advanced stuff as a quick little refresher so I can get up to speed with the major changes that have happened to Unity since I was last doing core development work. Now, these are the resources that just flat out didn't exist when I or my friends were starting off. And believe me, if I could swap years at university for this, I actually would. It would be a lot cheaper and I'd actually be in using Unity, which would be great. So check out Michael's stuff, do some game jams, meet people in your local game dev scene. That's the real way to get started. These are great for beginners. They'll take you right through, so they're just awesome. He's got 2D, 3D, building an RPG. It's just a brilliant resource, and you can get it on Skillshare, the online learning community for creators, with my link or with code Bellular Gaming. I mean, come on, what better way to use your free month? Okay, let's talk about the good of Dragonflight. Tone. Dragonflight has a tone of exploration and adventure. That is exactly what I want. I know the cinematic didn't have like a crazy moment to get you pumped like WODs or BFAs. That's kind of okay for me. WoW, got, I think let's be honest here, pretty damn try-hard and edgy with BFA and Shadowlands. Right? And it didn't work. So much the Shadowlands lore stuff, and it was just a wee bit cringy, to be honest. So this is a break from that. It seems like a genuine break from that. And when you go through the interviews, at least the very preliminary ones, words like classic and Azeroth and grounded keep on appearing again and again and again. They've made it very clear they want to go back to giving people a more grounded slice of just high fantasy Azeroth. I know grounded and high fantasy are like kind of different terms, but you get what I mean. The sort of older core Warcraft that we used to know. And I think that's great. Things were getting out of hand. I think they were pushing the lore in a direction where, they couldn't keep on just like, the big bad guy and then topping that big bad guy and then topping that. And that it would get kind of silly, The firstest ones, the before times. No, this is just like a nice slice of Azeroth. Now, that's not to say that we don't have threats. As an example, there's these primal dragons who didn't sign up with the Titans and the followers of Galakrond. So that certainly does hint at things that will be impactful for the lore. I think importantly, though, that we'll explore the Titan lore from the perspective of the Titan Watchers. Just like the Rock Boy that everybody likes from the cinematic. And that's very much how vanilla World of Warcraft gave us Titan lore. So for me, that's a really, really good change of speed. Talent trees. Oh man, this is good. So they're not just talent trees like what we used to have in the past. I think more importantly, the thing to understand is that these are replacements for borrowed power like artifacts, Azerite, and covenants. Huh, wow, that's great. Kind of wild. Because I just remembered, so many people who play World of Warcraft now have never known anything else. They've always had the game be driven by bing bing wahoo, bolt-on borrowed power stuff. So it's kind of weird. It's like we're old-timers if we played Moppin before, or Wrath or whatever. So I think a lot of people are going to get into this expansion, and they're going to feel naked. We've been trained to focus on these systems, these bars to fill, these, soul binds to bulk out, the renown to get, that I think for a lot of people, they're just going to feel naked when they hit max level in this expansion. Like, oh, I finished my talent tree. What do I do next? Forgetting that, we're kind of here to play the video game. So to me, it's extremely refreshing to basically have the game back. Because really, I know how good that feels from playing before Legion. I do think for many, though, it will be a bit funky. It'll feel a little bit different. That's okay. Sometimes change feels a bit strange, but it is for the best. Now, the idea then of splitting talents between class and spec, I also think that's really neat. Giving us the class fantasy and then letting them just do cool things with the specs. I know at least for the Druid tree, there was a lot of things that people are actually quite excited by. And if I think about, a new expansion, it's just, hey, here's 10 more levels, 10 more talent points, a few more talents, there you go, done. And they wouldn't need to add 10 talent points worth of new talents. They could just add 2 new talents or 3 new talents, but you'll be able to go a little bit more broad into the existing ones. They could add talents horizontally rather than vertically. There's quite a few things they could do there that should make this just a nice extensible system that thankfully will stand to the game for years. And development time on throwaway systems like shards, covenant powers, it's just that. It's time spent on things that we know are going to go into the bin. How many spells do they make for every class and every covenant to work with every spec for Shadowlands, most of which are going to go into the bin? Now, if we think about a World of Warcraft that doesn't have all of that borrowed power, that development time is going to be going more and more and more into things that will actually stand to the video game, making expansions feel like expansions rather than replacement recycles of the previous expansion, where sometimes even the core classes could end up feeling a bit stagnant. So that all seems really good to me. I think that these talents might actually allow them to build the game, build the core game experience, the gameplay again, and that is good. Flight that feels like flying, yes! Oh man, Dragonflight actually looks like it could be really fun. I mean the feature, not the expansion, but that too. This thing, right? Sometimes we get very much, we're filled bar spreadsheet gamers, and we sometimes can forget about the fun. Finding the toy in a game, the thing that's just intrinsically enjoyable to do. I think that's an important thing in a game, and MMOs can suffer from that because of their format. And that's why flying that actually feels like flight, I think, is brilliant. It is a way for Blizzard to do flying in a way that actually gives them lots of opportunities for gameplay design, and it, I think, could have a really nice knock-on effect on how these zones are designed. I mean, even think about, say, Storm Peaks, it was designed with flying in mind. Now, the way that this flying works is very much like you have momentum, there's physics. Now, okay, it could all just be animation-driven, it's hard to know if it'll literally be very physicsy in the implementation, but the idea is, if you want to get really high, well, your dragon's only got so many flaps in it, so you've got to find somewhere, do a big dive, do a swoop, all of that stuff, so you'll actually feel like you're flying this beast. And that actually means the player's skill could be involved there. This could very much take collection gameplay to another level, giving Blizzard lots of interesting ways to reward players, so that's quite nice. And it can let them do fun things, like races. I mean, remember the races in Netherwing? That was kind of cool, but this time round, there's going to be actual flying mechanics. Now, there's 4 mounts, there's many different customizations for each. There is also an elephant in the room. And sometimes people can get very touchy, very defensive over this. They were on Twitter, and I'm sure this is going to earn me a few snide comments, but I'm still going to do it. So this is straight up from Guild Wars 2. Now, borrowing an inspiration is, of course, great. On the shoulder of giants. That's how things develop. I've literally advocated for taking inspiration from Guild Wars 2 mounts in World of Warcraft. The one thing I will say is that as somebody who, knows both games, the literal animations are mega identical, the difference being the Guild Wars 2's ones feel more weighty and give you a better sense of speed. So that's, like, iffy. And I will say the Guild Wars 2 stuff, like, can confirm, mounts are just incredible. The best mounts in any MMO, by far. Flying just feels amazing. So fundamentally, that they're bringing some of that to World of Warcraft is genuinely really exciting for me. But I think Blizzard are a tad close to their neighbor, and in being so close, they're setting up a challenge for themselves. If World of Warcraft, because of the engine being old or whatever, struggles to get Dragonflight feeling as good as Guild Wars 2, like Griffin and the dragon flying, then to some people it will feel like a cheap knockoff. Now, I know some fanboys are already super up in my grill for pointing this out, which is kind of weird, because I remember when people clowned on like a Chinese knockoff mobile game or something for having almost identical dragon flying animations to WoW's. So it's like, the Blizz animations are really, really similar. So I'm just surprised Blizz didn't differentiate themselves just like a little bit more, even in terms of like the visual effects or stuff like that. And yeah, ArenaNet did not invent physics, flying, birds diving, or anything like that, but it is just the gameplay implementation of the feature that just feels, at least on first showing, a little bit close to the source material. But hey, unlike Guild Wars 2, you can get new skins and customizations for your dragon without going to the gem store. And that's pretty damn big for collection gameplay, isn't it? Anyway, look, this does look fun. In a way, this is flying from day one in the new expansion, which is pretty damn cool. I know it's basically just super gliders, but look, I would take this over flying as we have it in the game, because I'm a big believer in, the actual game stuff, like, feeling like, just things feeling, immersive or whatever. So your other mounts aren't going to be flying in the Dragon Isles. You'll be using this system. And look, I think this will have great knock-on effects for some aspects of content and zone design. And I'd probably be happy if this general way of doing things made it to some other mounts. I mean, seriously, Guild Wars 2 mounts are just awesome. Even the basic Raptor mount feels so good to use. So yeah, I'm happy they've borrowed from Guild Wars 2. I've been calling for this for years. I just want there to be enough of Blizzard's own spin in this feature to differentiate it. Speaking of other games, well, Professions have seen a rather FF14-inspired shakeup, and that is a good thing. There's now crafting, having its own gear, so you'll actually have sets of gear for your crafting profession. HQ crafts, like quality levels and stuff. Stats. It all looks great from what they showed. And, I used to like Professions back in the day, kind of fell out of love with them. This is really piquing my interest as an actual reason to come back. It looks like there'll be much more progression to the Professions, more just, more things where it's like you've been a blacksmith for a while. Now, like, you feel accomplishment from that. You have your gear set as a blacksmith. You've went into, your whatever specialization you have within blacksmithing. It just seems way more strong in terms of player fantasy. And the gear thing won't be a pain in your bag space, because you'll auto-swap into your crafting or gathering gear whenever you're doing that activity. Now then, add to that there's basically a crafting hub with like work tables in the new city, and it's all in one area, and it really seems like they want to deliver people that like gameplay fantasy of crafting and gathering, and just that being pushed more than ever before is great. So between this and the talents, what we're basically seeing here is Blizzard working on the basic quality of World of Warcraft, and that's really nice, because those talents will stand to the next expansion. This crafting overhaul will also stand to the next expansion. I just love that. There's also a really neat feature I didn't expect, and that's work orders. It's really cool. You can basically put up requests to craft an item and even supply your own materials, and then through the work order system, a crafter can craft it. There's room for payment and, tips and the like. So it's kind of a nice way for somebody to put their crafting to work without needing like a really big upfront material investment. I just thought it was neat. So look, this all just seems way better in the Professions front, and I'm really interested in it. Next up then, the world looks great. It looks like a slice of Warcraft. I mean, there's a zone that I think is best described as being pan-Northrend, complete with Tuskar. That's obviously up my alley. Now, they've talked about also big open zones, to the point where they've even increased the maximum view distance, and that is something that I love to hear. Zones, I think, have tended to get a bit too cramped and over-complex. You know, they feel more like game levels, less like regions in an immersive world, so I like the words they're saying. Art-wise, I think, as usual, fantastic. So, on the whole, this is more appealing on first glance to me than the Shadowlands zones. In principle, we obviously need to see how it panned out. An example, I thought Ardenweald looked really cool in concept, but I think it was kind of disappointing in reality. Just, you know, some of the design, you know, the amount of brown and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm not calling this as, oh, brilliant, you know, fantastic zones, but I really do like what they showed off. Old school reps aren't back, rather they've actually turned the Covenant system into basically mega reps. It could work. First, there's 0 player power attached. Second, there's basically one of these big reps for each zone, and you can do all 4 at the same time. There's no restrictions like with the Covenants. Now, Renown is there as a way of going through the rep. That could be an issue. Now it's weird. They say they like the Renown system in the interviews, which I kind of disagree with for Shadowlands anyway. And they kind of indicated not being unhappy with time gating, so those things I'm, you know, a little bit iffy over. But if you think about all of the stuff within a Covenant, kind of just turning that into a really, really big, you know, juiced up version of an old school, like pre-WoD rep, actually does sound good enough. It sounds like that could be a vehicle for a hell of a lot of world content, so I'm not going to call this as a brilliant thing, but certainly they've carved out room to do quite a lot of content. New racing class then, that sure is interesting. Same goes for the reaction to them. I'm putting it in the good category still, but I do get that for some people it's a letdown because this race is a bit more slender and sometimes straight up goofy with odd looking proportions compared to, say, the Draconids that were like the kind of big bulky chunkers that people maybe would have expected from this. So a bit of a departure from the usual in WoW. Yeah, they sure did that. You know, we've got slender twink dragon casters, I suppose, which perhaps you could say is a bit of a mismatch for what people wanted from a dragon race. For what they are, though, I mean, the customization options do seem super in-depth for both the base and visage form of the Drakthir. They probably, I think, could have went for something that would be a bit more broad appeal for the existing Warcraft audience, but it is what it is. I don't really mind. I'd be happy enough to try it out. Now, getting a male wearing range DPS and healer, I think it's good to have another male wearer in there. And the class does seem cool. I mean, that big, like, breath button, that looks fun. It's got these hold to cast empowered buttons where, you know, you hold the button in and the longer you hold it, different things happen. And one example was a spell being 1, 2, or 3 targets. But I think we just need to wait and see how they actually feel to play. Now, tying the race and the class does make sense. The Evoker class, which is what it's called, it fits the physiology of the Drakthir. You know, they've got like the wing buffet, tail attacks, some things like that. But maybe it's a bit odd they can't be a mage or something like that. But I suppose there would be some implications there on, like, you know, maybe animations, cost, I don't really know. But hey, it is a whole big new chunk of gameplay, so it is something I'm looking forward to. Super quick in UI, look, this may not be big for some, but WoW having UI that is just a bit more clean and modern out of the box, I think is a really good thing, especially since it does have that customization if you want to tailor it to your own needs. I think this is good for new players, and I think that is important for World of Warcraft's long-term health. Another important point is just admissions. Look, I think suffice to say, Blizzard acknowledging things got a bit shitty. That has certainly filled a few slots on our livestream bingo. I am extremely cautious, though, given their track record of getting claps for taking away the bad thing in the current expansion. But look, if you read between the lines and even just what Ian straight up said, it's quite clear that they know things went quite off track. That is good to hear. Now, if it felt less PR-ish and a bit more direct, as maybe the FF14 tells it to, that would have been nice. But I think for a big company like Blizzard, where, you know, it is the way it is, I suppose, where, like, I think Ian, even if he wanted to say, hey, sorry, we really went off track there, I'm sorry, we're going to try a bit harder this time. Like, I don't think he's even allowed to talk like that because of how their PR engine seems to work. But it was at least nice to see those admissions and then to see very much bold action based on those admissions with things like the talents. Just a quickie, alt friendliness, I think it's going to be humongously fundamentally increased because there's no borrowed power. Simple as that. You reach level 70, you fill out your talents, that's it. It's just gear. That is exactly what we want. Less risky. The design here is less risky, I think. A while ago, I mentioned even a 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 expansion is something I'd be happy with if it just didn't grate on me all the time with friction. Ian even mentioned the word friction in the like little thing they did. So look, I don't need to be blown away. I just need a solid slice of World of Warcraft content without the major pitfalls. Kind of seems like that's what they want to deliver. Okay, a few worries to finish this off with. So this is less a worry, but it is something Blizzard need to think about. Blizzard have trained their players to focus on borrowed power systems as the primary means of progression and motivation within World of Warcraft. They've trained people to play this game in a certain way. So removing that is going to feel super rough for many of the newer WoW players. And I just wonder how that's going to play out, and I wonder too how they're going to iterate on gearing. Anyway, then, without as much of a focus on that style of progression, Dragonflight very much puts the focus firmly on how good the content and the gameplay is. So will the core content be fun? Will there be innovation in the basics? I mean, a great example here is Blizzard struggling with the oddly named World Quest 2.0 of Shadowlands that kind of boiled down to just being slow and more annoying in terms of game feel. So how will they innovate on world content? Will they borrow Guild Wars 2 events? I don't know, they haven't really talked about what this stuff will look like. I imagine because this expansion isn't coming out this year. Basically, World of Warcraft has spun its wheels for years, wasting time on borrowed power dead ends that really didn't matter to the long-term quality of the game. And that means that on the actual game bit, they're now playing catch-up. So how much will they catch up? Shadowlands, as an example, saw one of the worst zones ever added to the game in Korthia, and then, one of the better ones in Zereth Mortis. How will it go? I think Dragonflight will need to innovate beyond Zereth Mortis. Honestly, if you're in the mood for stealing things from Guild Wars 2, take a look at their meta events and how their modern, expansion zones feel. They're really cool. Essentially here, they've got a lot more game to design because they can't lean on borrowed power progression kind of working in people's psychology. And that means that this could be underwhelming, or it could be quite magnificent. So, to end, is WoW on the up? I can't tell you how good this expansion is going to be. I can't tell you if these systems are going to work. What I can tell you, though, is a World of Warcraft that is just going, borrowed power, borrowed power, borrowed power, borrowed power, is a game that is never fundamentally growing. It's a game that's never investing in better foundations. At least here, with the talent revamp and the profession revamp, that is stuff that will last in the game for a long time. And if the developers don't have to think about adding domination shards or whatever the bullshit of the month is into every patch or whatever, and they don't have to think about balancing all the soulbinds and all the conduits and all of that with all of the legendaries and all of the soulbinds, if they don't have to think about that, maybe class balance will be better. Maybe there'll be more time to iterate on classes. If our talents are being revamped, does that not kind of mean we're going to be seeing plenty of change for classes? That's the thing. Some of these things are not major new features, but if I log into my mage and it's more fun in the next expansion, is that not the thing that we've purchased for the price of killing borrowed power? I mean, borrowed power could make my mage feel fun for a little bit, but it's going to go away eventually. So ultimately, that's why I am actually pretty excited and I'm feeling pretty good about this expansion. It has a slice of Azeroth that I find to be quite appealing. What seems to be an otter mount in one of those photos is also really fucking cute, so that's pretty cool. We got Stoneboy, like him. But to be more serious, the talent thing is really good, the profession thing's really good, dragon flying is really good. This just lets them go back to basics and make a really good game without having to worry or bother of any of just the systems design sludge that's held WoW back. Essentially, this is their big opportunity to build a game. instead of just a bunch of, well, is that maybe not it? Build a game, not the expansion. So there you go. I really hope this turns out well. They certainly have an opportunity. If you would like to support the channel, then you can check out today's sponsor Skillshare with the link down below, or just use my promo code. Seriously, Michael Moore stuff is awesome, so if you're interested in the game dev side of things, you can check that out. Otherwise, stay tuned on the channel. Tomorrow we will have a big old video going into all of the many additional details that we can extract from all of the interviews that have taken place with many different outlets, and we will have a cheeky little lore video for you on Friday. Have a great day, and goodbye.
Mm-hmm.